celebrate the life and work of Ishiro Honda on the second day of his tribute to him titled The Soul of Godzilla. My name is Steve Ryfle, and this is Godzishewski, and we wrote a book that is titled Ishiro Honda, Life and Film from Godzilla to Kurosawa. And you know, we're going to watch two of his classic science fiction films tonight, Godzilla made in 1954 and The H-Man from 1958. Ed flew in all the way from Chicago, so if you haven't already, let's give Ed a big Los Angeles welcome. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the American Cinematheque and from Dennis Bartok, who's been such a great supporter and booster of this genre and of Honda's work for many, many years, all the way on down, the entire staff and the volunteers here. There's been a great deal of effort that went into both tonight and yesterday, and we really appreciate their support. We're going to just say a few words about each of the two films that we'll see tonight. Ed's going to tell us a little bit about Godzilla, which will be screened in the original director's cut with subtitles.
Well, I suppose that all of you here tonight are at least somewhat familiar with this film. Probably not the first time that you've seen it, but we will be seeing the original cut of the film that until probably, I think it was the 50th anniversary in 2004, yeah, in 2004 that it finally made its way over to the United States. I mean, of course, most of people such as my generation, we grew up only knowing the American version, which is somewhat truncated and includes scenes shot for the American version of Raymond Burr. But yeah, that film, although I believe it still holds up very well in that version, it's not nearly the film that the original version is. It packs so much more power. It's a film that Honda had, and in various times, is always like any filmmaker, I think they change their minds as to what they believe is their definitive work. But I think really this is the film by far and away that I think anyone in the world of cinema is going to think about when they think of the name of Ishiro Honda. It was a film that started a whole genre. It's one of his probably one of his most personal films that really highlights, one of his major themes in his work, which was the themes of peace and anyway, it very well articulates his outlook on humanity. It's something that his experience in the war, which he had, which was very influential on his film work. And you can see all the feelings that he had up from the time that he experienced that he had in the war. And he makes a very powerful anti-war statement with this film. That's been analyzed to death probably over the years, so I'm not going to go into very much detail on it. But things to watch in the film. One thing that Honda really liked was documentary films. I mean, he used a documentary style in many of his films, especially his early films, such as this one. There's a very understated style to it, very matter of fact. Has a very, you have this very outlandish giant monster, which, at the time was the kind of thing that the film community in general looked down upon, especially critics. And a lot of people were reluctant to take on this project, but Honda embraced this. He was a man who also enjoyed science. He was probably just the right guy to do this film, because any project that he took on, he took very seriously. And his approach was, if you don't want to take this film seriously, even if it's a very unusual concept, that you shouldn't really work on it. And that attitude really infected the entire staff, all the people who worked on it. And the result is what you see on the screen, one of the most serious and sobering science fiction films that has been
This is a great, we call this, when we're playing this nuclear night, because the two films share this, this warning about nuclear proliferation, but it's handled in completely different ways, really. And it's interesting to compare and contrast the two films. I hope that you'll all stay for the H-Man, especially. I hope that you know, a lot of people coming in and mentioned that they hadn't seen it yet, so I think you're in for a revelation. H-Man is made just 4 years after Godzilla, but I think you'll find it kind of startling how different they are. We kind of refer to, I think of Honda, I used to think of him as, I use the term genre specialist, but really he was more of a genre chameleon. He could do a lot of different kinds of films, and he enjoyed exploring a lot of different kinds of films. And at the time that the H-Man was made, he was during a very productive period where he was making not only the science fiction films that we all know in this country, he was also making song films which were not out-and-out musicals, but they had pop stars starring in them, and they would often break out into song. He made war pictures. He made family comedies. He was exploring a lot of different kinds of genres and having a lot of success in that. This is a hybrid. The H-Man is really a hybrid of horror, the Japanese gangster picture, which was just really kind of coming into its own in the late 50s, particularly I think Nazi, and also science fiction, atomic fiction, but it's also got this film noir element to it. It's got jazz, like bebop jazz in it. It's got sex and drugs, all kinds of interesting things. So it's really, and Honda, you know, we write about it in the book, he's really kind of a gentle soul to a large degree. So this film is really, I think of it as him working, pushing his own boundaries a bit, because this film is really more edgy than most of the things that he did, and it's actually a descent into this lurid world of gangsters. And there's a really close thematic connection between Godzilla and the H-Man. Again, interesting to see how it's handled differently. Both films start with a nuclear accident involving a Japanese fishing boat, and both of those incidents are representations of something that really happened in Japan in early 1954. You may all you've read about Godzilla or heard about it. You've surely come across the Lucky Dragon incident, which was the case of a tuna trawler, Japanese tuna trawler, that wandered a little too close to the Marshall Islands at the time of an American H-bomb test. And the fishermen were actually within the fallout zone, and many of them became sick. And when they went back to Japan, it became an international incident. It sparked an anti-nuclear drive that has continued to this day and is still in evidence at the time of Fukushima. But so they both begin with that same kind of flashpoint, but in Godzilla, it's very clear that the film, and it's been, as Ed said, it's been studied quite a bit now. It's very well understood that the monster is a metaphor, representation of the atomic bomb. The H-Man, or the H-Men, are these atomic goblins that prowl the streets of Tokyo, and if you are unlucky enough to encounter one, you're left with nothing but an empty suit of clothes and a pile of goo. So it's a quite different representation in quote unquote monster form of the atomic threat. And it's got a great cast. Another contrast, some of these actors that appeared in Honda films, of course, worked for many directors at Toho. And he had some of these great actors that he would go back to time and again. And one of my favorites is Akihiko Hirata, who plays Serizawa in the first film, Godzilla, this great tragic character, and is really like the heart of that film, and really drives the drama toward its ultimate conclusion. And then in the H-Man, he's playing a much more normal kind of role. He's kind of like this by-the-book police detective. And so it's a great contrast. It's really interesting to see Honda working and blending all these different genres together. One of the things that I like about, and again, it's a common thread between the two films, these are two of Honda's darkest films. Godzilla is a dark film, and I don't mean just that. I don't mean that just thematically, but it is a physically dark film. He was working on that film for the only time with the camera crew and the lighting crew of the director Yukio Naruse, and Naruse's cameraman and his lighting man gave that film a very noirish look. There's a lot of effects, lighting effects where the characters are framed in light that's streaming in through a window or through the blinds and it's cascading over their face. Or look at the lighting in Sarazawa's lab. It's very, the low-key lighting is very stark and it's quite interesting. And you'll see another version of that in the H-Man. In the H-Man, he was working with a lighting man named Ishikawa, who was also like the Ishii, the lighting man on Godzilla, and Ishikawa were like the #1 and #2 lighting guys at Toho Studios, and they were highly in demand. And you'll see all these 3D lighting effects in the H-Man as well. The nightclub scenes are kind of bright and vibrant, but there's a scene in particular, and if you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it, there's a great sequence aboard a ghost ship, and the lighting effects in that particular scene are quite well done. So I hope you'll enjoy the films. And we're going to be doing a Q&A with our friend Steve Bedrosky in between the films. So I hope you'll stay for that. I hope you'll visit us in the lobby if you haven't already. We'd love